Greetings and salutations, everyone. I am, as always, darthdevious, bringing you another video review. This time, the third part of our Middle-earth history. We are looking at, from the Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, Gandalf the Grey. You see him here in his package, with his hat, his staff, Glamdring, the foe hammer. And we discussed where Glamdring came from in the last part of our history. So we'll turn this around. You see your product shots and the other figures, you know, all that stuff, blah 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 blah. I don't know if you want to read that. If you can, have at it on your own time. I am going to get him out of the package because this is one I've been looking forward to looking at because of all the wizards that are in all books and everything. To me, Gandalf is the wizard. That's it. So, be right back. Okay, Gandalf, out of the package. And yet again, another really good figure from the Bridge Direct. I will say that. Nice details on him. Love how his hat can come off. It's not a bad likeness of Ian McKellen, Sir Ian. I think once you see the Gandalf the White figure I have from Toy Biz from a few years back, they both look like Ian McKellen in their own way, while still having different face sculpts. So his head doesn't move too much, mainly because of his molded hair, which is a shame. But he has articulation. This cloak can come off, which is nice because this cloak can get in the way. So I'm probably going to keep it off for the rest of the review. And you see here he is without his cloak, without his hat. You see he's got a nice scabbard here for Glamdring. I don't know if I can get him in the pose, but let's see if I can do it. Let's see. Let's get the sword. You guys must know what I'm planning on doing right now. Almost. Can almost do it. You shall not pass! I had to do it. You know I had to do it. Come on now. So, he looks kind of cool here, sitting here holding his staff and Glamdring. Now, as I said in my history last time, Glamdring was the High King of Gondolin's sword. And it was one of the few things to survive the War of Unnumbered Tears when Gondolin was destroyed. So, yeah. I like this scarf here. It's nice. It's just nicely detailed figures. These things are pretty cool. I mean, articulation's decent, considering how much bulk he has on him. Love how he can just hold his staff and it can help him stand up a little bit anyway. I love how his staff is designed. That's just nice. It looks like the wooden staff that he has made out of like gnarled branches and stuff. Glamdring itself, nicely detailed, you know. Glamdring stayed with him the rest of his life. He took it across the sea back to Valinor with him at the end of the War of the Ring. So, pretty cool, if you ask me. Put his hat back on, because what's Gandalf without his hat? Because a wizard needs his wizarding hat. There we go. Now, he is from the 6-inch size class, and he actually is 6 inches. Now, if we take Mr. Thorin Oakenshield, you can see Thorin is about, you know, a few inches shorter. And then Mr. Baggins, we'll bring Mr. Baggins in, and he's a lot shorter. But they're all in scale with each other, and I think that just looks nice. So yeah, I recommend Gandalf. He's a nice figure. If you want to collect these 6-inch figures, I think these are the 3 best ones. Not really into getting Legolas and the other elf, but these ones I wanted. So, with that, I'm going to stop here, and we're going to go into the next part of our Middle-earth history. So at the end of the First Age, most of Morgoth's minions were either destroyed or fled. Orcs and trolls retreated into different mountains, the Misty Mountains, the Blue Mountains, wherever they could find refuge, because most of them hated the sun. The dragons, most of the surviving dragons, fled to the north, into the wastes. And every once in a while, one would come down and cause trouble, but it would generally be taken out. Of course, one of the most famous was Smaug, who came down and took over Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. Most of the Balrogs were actually destroyed during the breaking of the world. At least one that is known survived. And of course that made its way into the heart of the Misty Mountains and remained there till roughly the end of the Third Age, where, Gandalf eventually fought it and destroyed it. But, everybody knows that if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies or read the books. Now, it was at this time, in the very first year of the Second Age, that the city of Mithland, also known as the Grey Havens, was founded by the elf Círdan the Shipwright. And this was the only place on Middle-earth where you could leave in the white ships and sail to the west to Valinor. At the same time, on the other side of the Blue Mountains that was facing the shore, where Beleriand used to be, the last of the High Elven kings, Gil-galad, established the Kingdom of Linden. And it was about this time that the rest of the dwarves that had fled from the breaking of the world went to Moria to be under Durin's rule. So, when the First Age ended and Morgoth was cast out, his chiefest follower, Sauron, he went back to Valinor and repented for his actions. He was serious. He meant it. He did not want to be evil. But the seeds of evil were in him already. And as Tolkien says about Sauron, Sauron wasn't all about being evil for the sake of being evil. Sauron he hated what he considered to be the chaos of all the different races that lived in Middle-earth, and the wars and all this other stuff. And he was basically a very powerful control freak, and that's what eventually led him to become the Dark Lord that he was known as. So at first he truly was repentant for what he did, and he was living back in Valinor. And about 500 years into the Second Age, he left on a self-imposed exile into Middle-earth, because the Valar did not punish him for his actions. They felt he had been deceived, and he felt really bad for what had happened, so they kind of let him go. They really screwed the pooch on that one. So, like I said, about 500 years into the age, he comes to Middle-earth. He's real quiet. Nobody sees him. Nobody knows anything about him. But by the time you get to year 1000, he had already established Mordor as sort of his area. And his Tower of Barad-dûr was already being constructed. Or should I say the first incarnation of his Tower of Barad-dûr. He then decided that he needed to have control of the other races, to bend them to his will so that he can have the precious order that he desired. At first, he would go around in his original name of Myron, and he first went to Lindon and tried to seduce some of the elves that lived there. But Gil-galad was very wise. Gil-galad was probably one of the greatest elvish kings that ever lived, and he didn't trust him. Sauron wanted to work with them, wanted to do things with them. Gil-galad refuses him. And Gil-galad's kin, Galadriel, agreed with him, and as did Elrond and Galadriel's husband, Celeborn. Sauron then decides, he'll be a little patient. Give it some more time. He makes his way eastward towards the lower part of the Misty Mountains, not too far from where Isengard would be built in the Third Age. A little bit further north from there, but you know. There was the great elvish city of Eregion. Now, Eregion was ruled by Celebrimbor, the greatest elvish blacksmith that had lived. Now, he had been taught by, I think it was his father or his grandfather. I can't remember. I'd have to do the research. But Fëanor, the great elvish smith Fëanor, the one who had created the Silmarils in the First Age. Sauron came to him in this very fair guise, known as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He spends some time with the elves in Eregion, pretty much teaching them how to make certain things, and eventually he teaches them how to make the Rings of Power. Beginning with the 9, then they made the 7. But Celebrimbor was not stupid, and he still did not trust him. Despite who he said he was, he just did not trust him at all. Mainly because Elrond and Galadriel and Gil-galad didn't trust him either, so Celebrimbor was smart in this respect. He would not let Sauron have a hand in the forging of the 3 rings. So the 3 rings were forged last, and they were given away to their respective owners. Celebrimbor kept one. He gave another one to Galadriel, and the 3rd he gave to Círdan. But it was shortly after this that Sauron went to Mordor, to the mountain of Erodruin, which will be known henceforth as Mount Doom. And he constructed the One Ring. And he poured all his hate, his malice, most of his physical power he put into this ring because he needed it to control the other races. And his plan was, give the rings to the leaders of the free peoples of Middle-earth. He uses the One Ring to control them as their puppets. They in turn would control the people. Now, you see in the Lord of the Rings movies, you see Sauron in his giant demonic armor forging the ring. He wasn't like that yet. He was still in his fair guise. He still had, the look of a Maiar at that time. And that is how he forged the ring. Now, even with him pouring so much of his power into the ring, as long as he had the ring on, it actually enhanced the power that he had originally as just a plain Maiar, which made him very, very powerful indeed. But the second he put that ring on, the elves knew what he was doing, and they immediately took the 3 rings off their fingers and hid them. Celebrimbor ended up sending his own ring to Gil-galad. They all were hidden. And this was the smart thing. They kept them out of Sauron's control. Eventually they found a way to utilize them without letting Sauron manipulate them as much. But they were still enslaved to the One Ring, despite the fact that Sauron did not have a hand in them. He had more control over the 7 and the 9, but not the 3 as much. But he could still affect them. And about this time that Sauron had created the One Ring, he had also finished construction of Barad-dûr. Now, as soon as the 3 were hidden from him, Sauron became enraged. All this time he had been gathering slowly towards him all the beings that had followed Morgoth. So he had amassed a huge army of trolls and orcs and all manner of foul beings. And he began what became known as the War of the Elves and Sauron. He went to Eregion, and he battles with Celebrimbor. killing him. He had gone there demanding that they turn over the 9 and the 7. He takes the 9 and the 7, and then he sets his sights on Linden. He overruns all of Eriador. Now, Eriador, for those who don't know, is in between the Blue Mountains and the Misty Mountains. This is the land where, in the Third Age, you would find the Shire, Bree, Rivendell, places like that. That's where this is all taking place. In that place between the Misty Mountains and the Blue Mountains in the west. So, of course, I'll be putting a map up. You guys will see where it is. Anyway, Sauron is really overrunning everything, and his forces are just unstoppable. At about this time, after the destruction of Eregion, Elrond creates the refuge of Rivendell at the foot of the Misty Mountains. And even that is besieged. And they're having a hard time fighting it. And it looks like the elves are going to be destroyed. Linden is getting ready to fall. Eriador is just covered with Sauron's forces. All of a sudden, a great, vast army arrives in ships from Numenor. The men of Numenor have again come to save the elves from evil. They demolish Sauron's forces. It's said that the only ones who really survive are Sauron and his bodyguard. With his defeat, he returns to Mordor to try and consolidate his power once more. And it's about this time that the dwarves decide to shut off Moria from everything else. So they shut the doors of Moria, and they stay there for centuries before they begin branching out and, exploring other mountain kingdoms. Sometime after this, Sauron decides he's going to take on the guys of Anatar again, but this time, instead of going to the elves, he goes to 9 lords of men and gives them the 9 rings. And he goes to 7 dwarf lords and gives them the rings. He finds out that only the 9 are truly effective. And he had suspected that. He knew that of all the 3 races, men would be the easiest to sway to follow him and to control. And it doesn't take long from the time that he gives the 9 the rings till they become the Nazgul. The dwarves are naturally resistant to magic and, influence from others to control them. It's just how they were built by the one Valar. I think his name was Aule. He imbued them with this just natural hardiness where things really don't have too much effect on them. They're naturally resistant to most poisons. Magic has very little effect on them. You can't really use mind control on them. So the only real effect the 7 rings had them is it awakened this massive greed in the race. And this is where you start getting the dwarves that start gathering up the hoards of gold and things like that, which of course brings the dragons back out of hiding to attack the dwarf hordes. So that's how stuff like that happens. Sauron, of course, with now his 9 Nazgul, really starts to establish his power base in Mordor, but he would never forget what the men of Numenor did to him in the war of the elves and Sauron. And he would vow revenge on Numenor. So in the next part, we will be discussing exactly how that revenge was enacted, the consequences of it, and the ending of the Second Age of Middle-earth. So stay tuned for the next part, the rise and fall of Numenor. Thank you all for joining me, and again, Gandalf, fantastic figure. All of them, fantastic figures. I recommend the 6-inch line. I'm staying away from the smaller line. The 6-inch line is good. Later.